first responders have an insane amount of digestive issues. It's like universal that, whether you're police, fire, EMS.
Welcome to episode number 59 of the First Responder Wellness Podcast. My name is Conrad Weaver. I'm so glad you've joined us today. I hope you're doing well. And I hope you're eating well. What are the effects of sugar, caffeine, and alcohol on your body? And what should first responders eat in order to stay healthy? These are just a few of the questions I asked Chloe Schweinshaut today on the podcast. Chloe is a registered dietitian nutritionist who has worked with hundreds of firefighters, law enforcement, and military groups throughout the country. She's currently a nutritionist for the Boston Fire Department and has helped to start their in-house wellness program. Stay tuned for a conversation that will challenge you to think about what you eat. Hey, I'm very grateful that you're here listening to the show, and I invite you to subscribe if you haven't already. Then invite your tribe, the people around you, to join in as well. I drop a new episode every Wednesday, so share the link if you find this content helpful and informative. And if you have a moment, take a minute to write a review of the show. Let me know what you like, let me know what you don't like. I really appreciate all that kind of feedback. Thanks again for being here. And now here's my conversation with Chloe Schweinshaut. Well, Chloe, welcome to the First Responder Wellness Podcast. I'm so excited to have you on the program today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, so you are all about nutrition. And so tell me a little bit about that journey. How'd you get to that point in your life?
Yeah, definitely. It was a career change for me. I started out working in professional sports. I worked for the Boston Red Sox for a number of years. And I had several roles there, but my final role was working in human resources. And while there, I got to oversee workplace wellness. And at that time, workplace wellness was in its infancy. So it really was a neat opportunity to kind of create a program from the ground up. And I had kind of always loved nutrition. But then after being the person responsible for bringing in the nutritionists and kind of working on the wellness end, I knew that that was where I wanted my life and career to go. And so I made the tough decision, because professional sports is so fun to work in. And it was such a cool job. I was there when they won one of the World Series. So I made the decision to go back to school to become a registered dietitian. I knew I always wanted to start my own private practice. And, I worked with Beth Israel Hospital here in Boston. I wanted to be able to be equipped to see anyone that came through my door with any medical condition. And then in 2015, I opened the doors to my private practice, where I started seeing everyone from little babies to adults. I am married to a firefighter. I'm now a fire lieutenant in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And quickly I kind of started seeing his friends and their friends. And then I got invited to speak at a conference at Boston Fire, a wellness symposium. And then I got invited to go down to FDNY to speak at a few conferences there. And pretty soon this kind of became my whole world, is working not just with firefighters, but first responders all over the country. And I fell in love with this group just because I felt like, there's so many awful health, you read about all the awful health statistics that they're up against. And
Sure.
I really felt like there was a lot of space in this field to really make a difference with them.
What are some of the unique challenges that you see that first responders face when it comes to nutrition?
So many, and so much of it comes down, I think, to not just timing, because I think, what we know now is it's very important what you eat, but also the times that you eat are incredibly crucial to overall health, to your metabolic health. And first responders, anyone who's working on shifts, is working at really obscure times. And so their eating gets really messed up, and that messes up their circadian rhythm, which is going to mess up their overall health too. So I feel like timing is a really challenging thing. Obviously, the lack of sleep and interrupted sleep and dysregulated sleep, that can affect our food choices. So it kind of has a trickle down effect there. But I would say that the biggest thing that I see, and the biggest component of my practice that I try to work on, is with stress, because we know that stress comes in multiple shades.
Mm-hmm.
There's the stress of what a first responder might see on a call. There's the stress of waking up really suddenly with alarms and lights, and that's not how our bodies are designed to wake up. There's the stress of eating really quickly. If an alarm sounds and you have to take a call, there's a tendency to just kind of shovel food in, or maybe you're eating in your car if you're a police officer, that's stressful. Also, first responders have an insane amount of digestive issues. It's like universal that, whether you're police, fire, EMS.
Why is that?
Well, so many reasons. And I think honestly, for all of the things we just talked about, whether it's disruption in circadian rhythm, whether it's irregular sleep habits, at the core of it, our bodies love to be on a schedule, and they need to know when to predict things. And being a first responder means that you can't predict anything, and your body can't predict anything. So it becomes really hard. I also think that when we're doing things like eating on the go, when we're shoveling food in our mouths really quickly, our digestive system doesn't get a chance to kind of slow down. I also think too that our digestive system needs times to rest. And doing things like eating or grazing throughout the day, or eating late at night. Our digestive system likes to go to bed too. And so if we're eating throughout the night, which oftentimes, if you're on shift, it's what you do, that really messes up your digestive system. And that's a big stressor. And I think, when we're looking at all of these things under the lens of nutrition, with stress especially, we know that when our bodies are under any type of stress, whether it's emotional stress, physical stress, digestive stress, it does things like it burns through nutrients. It burns through B vitamins and zinc and vitamin D and vitamin C. So it definitely impacts our nutrition. It's all connected.
Yeah, and it probably doesn't help too that oftentimes first responders are stopping at the 7-Eleven and grabbing, a bag of chips or a Snickers bar or a Coke, things like that all in all are terrible for you.
Yeah, it's weird how that works.
I mean, I've seen that, I was doing ride-alongs, and we just pull into the gas station and, the Quick Mart and just grab something, because that's the only time that this officer had to eat, and it was between calls, and hopefully the call didn't come in while she was in the middle of, eating, and then off you go to the next call. And so, yeah, that's a lot of stress.
And that's a great example too, because then if we look at all of the things we just talked about, like you're not getting enough sleep, you're not eating, your body's going to be tired. It's going to be exhausted. And one of the things we look for when our body's tired or in a state of being run down, anything like that, is sugar, because it's our quickest source of energy. So that when we have, 5 minutes to run into 7-Eleven, 7-Eleven does offer other, you could get trail mix there, you could get that, but that's not going to give you the caffeine you need or the sugar your body needs for that quick source of energy. And so one thing I always tell first responders is it's not your fault. Like, you have these cravings. It's not that you yourself are making bad choices. Your body's making them because it's telling you what it needs.
So when you're thinking about a quick hit of caffeine or energy, I mean, I'm a coffee drinker, as I have my mug right here. What is the difference, or where does it come where that kind of caffeine is good or bad? And then if you put it into a latte, then you're adding a bunch of other stuff to it, right?
Yeah, definitely. And caffeine's funny, caffeine is totally studied, and totally beneficial up to a certain point. 400 milligrams a day is considered to be safe. It can be effective.
And how much is that in practical terms? Is it?
So let's see. So hold up your mug of coffee there, right? So that's a nice big mug. I would say, the average 8-ounce mug can be around like 80 milligrams of coffee a day. You might be pushing to. So maybe that's 2 to 3 cups of a bigger mug, or 4 to 5 cups of a smaller mug too. But with caffeine, it can also be used as a workout aid, right? I think pre-workout powders that are especially popular in the first responder community, I'm forever telling people, like, okay, that's fine. Have a cup of coffee, have a cup of tea. Like you're getting that caffeine, it's really beneficial for working out too, or it can be. I think where caffeine gets to be dicey is when it becomes a Band-Aid for everything else. And so if our sleep's a wreck, obviously I can't change the calls people are going on, but I can help with the quality of sleep that they're getting. I visited a fire station yesterday, and we were talking about energy levels because, as you know, fire stations, police stations are dumping grounds for energy drinks. And they were asking, okay, but if we're experiencing that kind of lull in the afternoon, like what should we reach for? And, of course, reach for coffee, reach for tea, reach for green tea because it's really high in antioxidants. But one of the other things too is we can kind of backpedal and say, okay, but are you exhausted because maybe you had a really bad night of calls, or are you exhausted because your sleep isn't good? Are you someone who breathes through their mouth at night? Are you someone who snores? We know that that's going to make you exhausted the next day. So kind of working backwards too and helping people understand. But overall, I love caffeine in the right amount, so long as it's also not interfering your sleep. But then if we also, kind of circling back to when you said, why do first responders have so many digestive issues? Well, caffeine is a digestive irritant too. So if we're having a lot of that, that can really aggravate our digestive tract as well.
But I'm supposing you don't recommend, dumping 3, spoonfuls of sugar in here either, right?
No, no, not usually. Although I'd rather, you're controlling your own sugar by adding it in than going and getting a Starbucks or, whatever, triple, whatever, latte, fall pumpkins, anything. Because those definitely add up. Because, caffeine is going to kind of stimulate you, but then the sugar from that is going to also contribute to a pretty gnarly crash later on.
It's amazing. I saw a video the other day on YouTube where someone was taking, it was actually a Chick-fil-A, I think a lemonade. And they were estimating how much sugar is this in a regular lemonade from Chick-fil-A. It was insane. The amount of sugar that's in there.
Really?
It's like you think you're drinking something, more healthy, but it was like, it was just and he put it on a scale, so it was like a pile of sugar on the scale. It was crazy.
Well, right. And like you said, you think you're like, okay, lemonade, they're squeezing lemons. It can't be as bad as soda, or it can't be as this. And then you look, you're like, that is so much worse than soda for that.
Right.
So no, it's sneaky. There's a lot of hidden sources for sure.
So, energy drinks, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the ones, I forget the name of the ones with the claw marks down the side.
Oh, Monster.
Monster drinks. How are those good, bad? How bad are those actually?
Not great. There can be ingredients there that can be really tough on the heart. I think first responders already are facing a bit of an uphill battle with heart stuff from so many different factors, but those definitely provide a bigger stress. I also think, the caffeine you're getting from coffee or a cup of tea isn't going to be as much. It's going to be a little bit slower released. And so your body's not going to feel that insane jolt. Again, I also, encourage people that if they're exhausted, and yes, this job is exhausting, and I don't want to take away anything from that. Look at other factors too first, like water. We need half of our body weight in water every day. That's kind of just a baseline recommendation for that. If we're not getting enough water, we're dehydrated. Yes. But what does that look like? That looks like fatigue. So oftentimes I see people reach for these energy drinks, and then I'll check in and say, all right, but have you had enough water today? No. All right, we'll start there. Like that alone, that is, I will tell you, of working with people now for close to a decade with this population, when someone consumes enough water every day, the first thing they say is, I can't believe how much more energy I have.
And you don't think about that. You think it's just water. It's just H2O. How can that provide energy for me?
Yeah.
And so how does it provide energy for me?
Right. Well, without totally sounding like a huge nerd, every single metabolic reaction in our body depends on water. So if we think about it like that, at the very baseline, all of our systems, all of our organs, everything needs water and everything slows down when it doesn't get it. Of course, our body is amazing and can make water from anything, but give it that in abundance and it doesn't have to work that much harder either. So I would say my number one health tip across the board, first responder or not, is just make sure you're drinking enough water every day.
Is it beneficial to occasionally add some like electrolytes into the water?
Oh, I love that question so much. Yes, absolutely. So electrolytes are, different nutrients that we need. And what they do is really cool because they help direct water into where they're supposed to go, into cells that need them the most. So obviously, if you're a firefighter, you have a really big fire, electrolytes are crucial because they help replenish your stores, help rehydrate you really, really quickly. For the average person or for someone who's, a first responder, not fighting a fire, but just kind of every day, electrolytes can be really beneficial in that you're hydrating, but then the water is also being directed to the places that need it most. So how do you know if you need electrolytes? If you're tired, if you are fatigued during workouts, cramping. The other ones is if you suffer from digestive issues like constipation or diarrhea regularly, adding in electrolytes can alleviate both of those things as well. So they are really beneficial. Also, I notice in the first responder community, doing things like intermittent fasting is really popular. And so that's a group I especially target to definitely focus on consuming enough electrolytes just so you don't dehydrate, because they will rehydrate you a lot faster. I think in general, it's important to note that when we wake up, we dehydrate in our sleep. We lose about 1 liter of water overnight, regardless, and 40% more than that if we're a mouth breather or snorer. So we wake up dehydrated at baseline. So if you are doing a fast where you're not eating, let's say, till 11 or 12 in the day, having water with electrolytes can be really beneficial because it'll help rehydrate you a lot faster where you're not getting, because you do get electrolytes in food too, but where you're fasting, you wouldn't. So I love electrolytes.
If you're working out, and we noticed this last summer when I was riding a bicycle across the country, it was often in those afternoon hours that we took those drinks with electrolytes, and it really seemed to boost our energy levels at that point because we were more depleted at that point.
Absolutely. So there you go. A perfect example. So for everyone listening who hits that afternoon slump, whether you're biking across the country or sitting in the station, try an electrolyte drink in the afternoon before an energy drink.
The other thing we discovered, so early on in the trip, we'd stop mid-morning at a gas station someplace and grab one of those iced coffees from Starbucks, in the glass jar. And we thought, man, we're getting so much energy. And then one day I looked at the sugar content in that and I about fell off my bicycle.
Well, you were getting energy, just a quick source.
Yeah. And so I ended up, that day was the first time I had ever discovered Celsius. And so I mean, it seemed to work just as good as but it didn't have all the sugar content. So, I mean, I don't want to go into brands and stuff, but is that good or bad?
I mean, I would say Celsius definitely, of all of the energy drinks out there, has done a phenomenal job of marketing themselves as kind of the healthier, posher energy drink. It's fine. I think once in a while, fine. But at the core, it's still an energy drink. So, meh.
Yeah. So if I want to really get in shape, if I want to, lose 10 pounds, and what should I be eating?
Yes, great question. So before I would even talk about food with you, I would talk about your habits around food. So the first thing I would do is we would talk about water. Are you drinking half of your body weight in ounces in water every day? We've established all systems need them. Weight loss is no exception. It's really helpful. Oftentimes, we think that we're hungry when we're actually thirsty. So it's good to kind of cross that off, make sure you're hydrated. Okay, so that's step one. Step two is I'm a huge advocate for not eating past 7 p.m. at night, first responder or not. The only exception is if you are a firefighter and have a huge fire in the middle of the night and need to replenish your stores. But for the average first responder, and even those who are just going on calls continuously throughout the night, do not eat, do not snack on anything. Just go back to bed, or if you're up in patrol, just stay in your car. Do not eat, do not snack. So that's where I would go first. And to be honest, those two things can honestly help people lose weight before they even have to touch their food. And I think, as a dietitian, that's one of the things that I'm really passionate and adamant about is like, let's look at the habits, because it can be so tempting to say, okay, I'm only going to eat this food, for the time that I'm working with you. But then in the months after you're working with me, you can go back to old ways, or, feel like maybe you were on a strict diet, and then kind of things liberate. So that's why habits are great, because they're kind of sneaky little ways of making sure that you reach your health goals. That being said, the other thing I would add to that, if you are trying to lose weight, is to just make sure for lunch and dinner that half of your plate is vegetables. It's a great way. We need a lot of fiber. Women need 25 grams a day. Men need 38 grams a day. We know fiber is crucial, not just for weight loss, but for cardiovascular health, all metabolic health, cancer prevention, all of the scary things that first responders face. So I would say, kind of keep it simple in there. Drink half of your body weight in ounces of water every day. Stop eating by 7 p.m. and fill half of your plate with veggies for lunch and for dinner. And then, of course, you can kind of fine tune things, like make sure that every meal has a source of a protein, a healthy fat, a fiber, make sure that you're eating whole, real foods. But I do kind of just like to start with a foundation, just because food preferences can vary. Some people may be vegetarian, some people may be on the carnivore diet, whatever it is, but have the healthy habits in place.
How are those fad diets that, like the keto and some of those things that have kind of made its rounds around the world? What's good and what's not?
Oh, I love them all. And I'll tell you why. One thing I've learned from talking to different first responders around the country is that food is so personal, and the choices that people make around food can be so personal to them, meaning that somebody may have cured whatever ailment they have with this way of eating. That doesn't mean it's right for me, and that doesn't mean it's right for you. But who am I to say, well, I don't want you eating like that. If that works for you, I'll give you an example. I had someone in the military I was working with who swore that the carnivore diet cured his ADHD. Okay, I would never eat the carnivore diet. I wouldn't necessarily promote that, but if that worked for you, that's awesome. So what I tell people is think of nutrition like building a house. There's so many different styles out there. I may be a modern house gal, while Conrad, you may be a center entrance colonial kind of guy. I'm not telling you that your style of house is wrong or my style of house is right. There's so many different styles. But what's important is that you have a good foundation. And as long as you have a good foundation, I don't care what your house looks like. So in terms of fad diets, I'm there for them, all of them. I love hearing what works and what doesn't, so long as, it's not starving you. You're getting enough vegetables, you're getting enough protein, you're drinking enough water. So long as all of those things are in place, who am I to say what works well for someone and what doesn't?
Let's talk about dinner at the firehouse, because those can be, you have different crews and they have different people that make dinner for different shifts and stuff. And sometimes the people that are making dinner, they like all the comfort foods. And I see a lot of that at firehouses. And so how does one manage your healthy diet when, other people are making dinner for you and it's not necessarily the best thing?
That's a great question. And I have, what I say to people is, first and foremost, eating a home cooked meal is going to be better than getting takeout from anywhere.
For sure.
So eating homemade Chicken and broccoli ziti Alfredo is definitely going to be better than going out to Panera or somewhere else. You're controlling the ingredients, you're controlling the sodium, you're controlling the you're controlling all of that. So don't overly fret about a home cooked meal, no matter what it is. I care more that firehouse dinners are early. And if someone's making a comfort meal, make them even earlier. Give your body a chance to digest and work through that. I also say I don't care about the dinner so much as you're filling half of your plate with vegetables. So if somebody's making the most fat, calorically laden chicken parm that ever was, I don't care. Enjoy that. Just fill the other half of your plate with broccoli. And if you're going for seconds, keep the same proportions. I think with firehouses especially, that is such a time for community and such a time, an important time of the day to kind of come together, sit down, even if you're not saying anything, even if you're just teasing each other and being awful and making jokes, you're together. And the sense of community trumps worrying about the calories or the macronutrients of certain meals. But that being said, please make firehouse dinners earlier.
How does what we put in our mouth, how does that affect our brain?
Interesting, right? And I think more and more research is coming down the pipeline. It seems like every day on, certain nutrients and their impact on our brain. I think I'm fascinated by listening about the connection with sugar and, neurocognitive diseases and degeneration, and just realizing that added sugar really is the scariest thing in the world. There are certain nutrients that our brain absolutely needs when we're looking at depression, anxiety, and things that riddle the first responder community. And so making sure that we have enough vitamin D, making sure that we have enough B vitamins, magnesium, all of these things are proven to help with our brain health. And I think, in terms of what we put in our mouth, when we give food that function of, okay, I'm eating this, maybe not just for weight loss, but also to kind of help our brain health, I think it definitely adds incentive for sure.
Mm-hmm. And as far as supplements, is it important to be on a regular diet of like vitamin D and C and all the other alphabet, as far as vitamins?
Yeah, definitely. So certain things, like I just said, vitamin D is crucial for brain health and mental health diseases in general. Vitamin D is actually really hard to get from food. There is not a lot of food sources. I think it's like mushrooms, salmon, vitamin D fortified milk, egg yolks. Like it's really a short list. And here in the Northeast, when it gets dark early and, the winters are long, a lot of us are vitamin D deficient up here. Remember also, a little bit ago, we talked about stress, how it depletes certain nutrients, and vitamin D is one of them. So there's a lot of reasons why vitamin D supplementation is definitely indicated within this community. In terms of other supplements, absolutely, eating a variety of foods, eating a lot of vegetables will definitely help cover your bases. But again, for this population that is under enormous amounts of stress, their bodies are under stress, that depletes a lot of nutrients. So I do see the need oftentimes for additional support. And your body kind of will give you an indication of that. Like, are you fatigued more often than usual and you can't kind of figure out why? Are you getting sick, more often than maybe other people in your house or other people around you? So you definitely do, and then you can look, are your nails breaking easily? Are your skin issues, things like that too, kind of gives you indication. But I will say in this population, more often than not, I do see need to supplement in certain ways.
Mm-hmm. And talk about carbs and what's the good and the bad and the ugly for, of carbs.
Yeah. So carbs are great. Some carbs, not all carbs. Sugar's a carb. That's not a great one. Fiber's a carb. That's my favorite one. It just really depends. I think if we're looking at carbs, fruits and vegetables, that's a source of carbohydrates. Those are obviously really good to include, unless you're doing something like the keto diet where you have to meticulously manage your carbohydrates to under a certain amount of grams a day. For the rest of us, carbohydrates, that's what our brain uses as fuel. So we need to make sure that we're getting enough. But as you said earlier, what we put in our mouth does impact our brain health. So we need to make sure we're getting the right ones. So looking for carbohydrates that have a source of fiber is a really good place to start, because that will ensure that you're getting more whole grains, things of that nature too.
What's a best practice for breakfast? There's so many breakfasts that we can buy off the shelf are just full of sugar. What's a good first thing to put in our mouth, in the morning?
Yeah, definitely. So, if you are eating breakfast, obviously those who are intermittent fasting, sometimes maybe they're not breakfast eaters. So, that's different. But for those of us who do eat breakfast, having a combination of a protein, a healthy fat, and a fiber will help balance your blood sugar, help give you that good energy throughout the day, and also help keep you satiated. You should be able to go, a good rule of thumb is you should be able to go 3 to 4 hours between each meal. So I guess breakfast is kind of a good check-in point that if you're having a breakfast and you're hungry an hour or 2 hours later, that probably wasn't the right breakfast. And I would include one with more protein. So for instance, having a quick breakfast would be, maybe scrambling 3 eggs and throwing in some baby spinach in there, and then having a piece of whole wheat toast with that. Or if you can do like a sweet potato or something like that, great, or some fruit. Or if you like oatmeal, having oatmeal, but not just having oatmeal plain, adding enough to it. So adding protein in the form of like nuts or seeds, then adding fiber. And so berries. So you could do oatmeal with a 1/4 cup of almonds and a cup of blueberries. That would be an example of breakfast. Or the same with Greek yogurt that has protein in it, but I would also add some fiber to it. So maybe like a cup of fruit. I personally love smoothies in the morning. I'm always running around in a million different directions, especially when my husband's at the firehouse. We have 4 kids, so trying to get them up and out the door. So I'm a huge fan of making a smoothie for myself in the morning because I can kind of take it to go. But just making sure that I'm loading it with a lot, like I throw peanut butter in there, hemp seeds in there, cacao nibs. I throw everything but the kitchen sink. It's brown and the grossest thing in the world, but it tastes delicious and it fills me up. So I would say breakfast, whatever can hold you for about 3 to 4 hours and has a good combination of protein, some sort of good healthy fat, and then fiber.
So is there anything that we should just avoid at all costs?
Avoid at all costs? Trans fats. That's the one thing I would say avoid at all costs. And those
what is a trans fat?
Right. So it's an artificially man-made fat that's basically designed to make food products shelf stable. And they're nasty little things because they raise inflammation in our body. They actually raise our bad cholesterol and lower our good cholesterol. There's literally not one good thing about them anywhere. And they're added to things. This usually makes me not very popular, by the way, when I talk to people, because they're found in firehouse staples such as Jif peanut butter, Skippy peanut butter, Coffee Mate creamer. You can find them in a lot of different, I don't think they're called ice creams. They have frozen dairy treats or, ice cream type novelties, things like that. And so it's really tricky because food manufacturers aren't required to label that a product has trans fats if it has 0.5 grams or less. So a product could have 0.4 grams and still be really harmful for our health. And food manufacturers can write trans fat free, which is really sneaky. Wow. So the only way to know for sure is to flip over and read the ingredients and look for the words hydrogenated something oil or partially hydrogenated something oil. And then that product has trans fat. So those are the only food things that I would say, please steer clear of because they're just awful for your health.
And let's talk about the big issue, I think, in the first responder community, and that's alcohol.
Yeah. Yes. What should we talk about? You're not wrong. You're not
I
wrong.
mean, how has that, I mean, as we know, alcoholism within the first responder community is a problem, has been for years. I mean, I had an old guy that told me one time, in my day, it was suck it up, here's a beer.
Yeah.
And that's how we dealt with stress. And so, and we see what, I just was at the IACP convention in Boston, and every afternoon, 2:00, it was happy hour time, and everybody's walking around with a beer. I'm not against drinking. I have a glass of wine. I'm not a big beer drinker, but I have a glass of wine or two with dinner occasionally. But there's good and bad in all of that, right?
Yeah. And just, as we were talking about caffeine earlier, you never want to use caffeine to mask something else. You never, the alcohol is the same way. I think it's interesting as a practitioner, my advice over the years has kind of changed from like, oh, everything in moderation, a little bit of alcohol is okay. Whereas, all the research now is saying no amount of alcohol is okay. And not to be the literal buzzkill, but if this is a population that has a crazy high incidence of cancer and heart disease, like what are we doing? What are we doing drinking when, it really isn't good for us? And if somebody has a glass of wine now and then, if somebody drinks, that's fine. Just like, whether you're on the keto diet, the carnivore diet, I'm not here to judge you, but I am here to tell you that no amount of alcohol is good for your health. And that needs to be known in this community. And that shouldn't be accompanied with shame. That shouldn't be accompanied with guilt. It's just a fact. And just like I said, trans fats aren't good for you. Alcohol isn't good for you. So once that becomes more and more accepted, I think, it helps people decide, all right, am I drinking because everyone around me is drinking and it's 2:00, it's happy hour, I feel like I should go out? Or can I stop, take a second and actually make a conscious choice of, do I actually want this drink when I know what it's doing to my health? And obviously, there are people who have issues and problems and face things like alcoholism. And that's a whole different story. But, if we're looking at what alcohol does to the body, there is nothing positive that it does to the body. And then if we look at things like, okay, alcohol is the most toxic substance we can put in our body, the most toxic substance on the planet. Our liver literally has to stop what it's doing to metabolize out a beer before anything else that it comes in contact with. So if you're a firefighter and you've gone to a fire and you've just breathed in all of these awful carcinogens, and then after shift, the tendency is like, let's go grab a beer. That was exhausting. Let's go bond over this. Okay, your body can't metabolize out those carcinogens first. It has to metabolize out that alcohol first. So that's one of the reasons why I say, especially to firefighters, after you have a fire, please don't drink for at least 3 days to give your body a chance to metabolize everything else out. And then for those first responders that do drink and maybe don't want to give it up or aren't able to give it up, this is where I would 100% recommend some sort of B complex or multivitamin, because alcohol does deplete our nutrient stores really, really quickly too. So total bummer. I'm not popular with that one either when I speak places, but it's the truth. And I don't want to lie to people, but I am encouraged. I don't know if you're seeing this too, like dry January, sober October. Like I'm talking to more and more first responders who are asking me for mocktail recipes and other things. And so I think this non-alcohol or sober curious movement is really, it's a neat thing. And it's cool to see it trickle down into places like the first responder community too.
Yeah. I've even heard of like a alcohol-free cruise. Like you can go on a cruise ship and there's no alcohol. It's all mocktails and,
fabulous.
They're probably pretty rare because, most people go on a cruise
cruises to get loaded.
Right. So, but I've heard that some cruise lines are offering that because they know that many of their customers don't drink and don't want to drink. And so I think that's an incredible movement,
I think so too. And I just had someone tell me about there is a bar, I think they're in Jacksonville, Florida, or somewhere around there, somewhere down in Florida where it's an alcohol-free bar where they're serving mocktails and things like that. So I'm I'm here for all of that. I think that's really neat.
Yeah. And, you're ultimately going to have a better experience if you're not, liquored up, right?
Yeah.
You have
And
better
you'll remember it at
interactions.
least.
You'll remember it at least. Yeah. I know I was having dinner the other night in East Boston, and I was sitting at a bar because I was by myself, and full disclosure, I had a glass of wine. But there were some people there that were regulars. I could tell because they all knew each other and they knew the bartender. And this one guy, you could just tell his eyes were drooping, and he had, probably 3 too many at that point, and was still putting him down. And it was just sad to watch.
Yeah, it really is.
And so it's a problem. And, I've seen it. I mean, I don't want to throw shade on anyone, but I was at a very well-known wellness conference for law enforcement. It wasn't IACP, but it was another wellness conference. And they had a open bar happy hour every evening.
It's cruel. It's cruel to do, for this population that already has to deal with awful PTSD, and depression and all of that. We're giving you alcohol, which is a depressant. It's going to make you feel worse. It's going to make everything worse. And it makes me sad when organizations or places like that kind of foster that culture when you're really doing a disservice. It would be like if I just started handing out candy everywhere I went.
I'm a nutritionist here. Have a candy bar.
Exactly, which I have been known to do. So I guess I don't want to be too hypocritical. But
yeah, well, these are interesting and challenging times we live in, and the stress that all of us feel, whether you're a first responder or not, I think can cause people to reach for substances that perhaps dull the pain, and alcohol is definitely one of those. That is, like in my film, Dr. Phil Bequee says it's, readily available and socially acceptable.
Totally.
And unfortunately, it's also killing a lot of people and destroying lives. And but so, any final words of encouragement or ideas for wellness for our first responder friends?
There's that old saying, genetics loads the gun, environment pulls the trigger. And I think that's hugely true to the first responder community, because it seems so often that there's so many health consequences that come from this job that it can just feel hopeless. But then remembering that you can control certain things, and, while there's so much you can't, there's a lot that you can, and nutrition and eating habits and things like that are great places to start. So it's not totally hopeless.
So Chloe, where can we get in touch with you? Where can we contact you? Do you have anything else that you want to share with our audience?
Absolutely. So you can follow me on Instagram at healthyresponse.com. Healthy Response was a company I created to put out information for first responders on health and nutrition. We actually recently launched supplements this past fall. I'm not someone who focuses on needing supplements, food first, habit first, as you heard. But with this population, I found that they're going to be taking supplements, and I want to recommend ones that are third-party tested, and that are specifically targeted for this population to meet their higher needs of stress and things like that as well. You can email me at chloe@myhealthyresponse.com. And I also wanted to share that for any listeners in the show, if they are interested in ordering supplements, to use the code First Responder, and they'll get 30% off their order. And the supplements are called Healthy Response, and it's on myhealthyresponse.com.
Well, thank you so much for that offer. We'll be sure to put those links in the show notes so people can access that directly. Chloe, again, thank you for being on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, thank you, Chloe, for this helpful and informative conversation. I have to say, I'm already drinking more water because of my time with you. Hey, be sure to check out Chloe's website. I've put a link in the show notes, and be sure to use that coupon code First Responder to be able to save 30% on your purchase of those nutritional supplements that she offers there. Thank you for listening or for watching. And just a reminder that I'm here every Wednesday with a brand new podcast episode. So be sure to tune in again next week. And please remember, you are not alone. And if you need someone to talk to and don't know where you can turn, you can dial 988 for help. Until next time, be well, take care of yourself and those around you, and eat well, and go out and do something great in the world.